Cast, where we've got Gary as well as Mike and Nick talking about the today's topic is the infamous debate from last week. I think it's probably been analyzed and brutalized and obsessed over for about the last 4 or 5 days. So we're doing a bit of a post mortem on the debate. First off, Mike and Nick, what did you guys think of the debate? Did you get a chance to see it?
Yeah, that was it was interesting, and I don't think there was any real surprises.
Mhm.
I mean, it kind of played out as exactly as I'd anticipated it was going to be. Biden was old, and Trump lied the entire time. So,
Yeah,
you
two
know,
big surprises.
two big
Yeah,
surprises,
yeah,
like shocker. You know,
yeah.
I don't, I'm kind of I mean, I know debates aren't always, especially in recent years, ever really argued around facts, but I'm hard pressed to find anything that Trump said was true.
Right.
And Biden, man, like it's just kind of shows, it really is, it's really showing how out of touch I think the party is, if with everybody,
Mhm.
if that's the horse they're gonna run.
And
Yeah,
yes, Mike, your thoughts?
it was. So I listened to it at work. Um, yeah, and uh, Biden kept it together for like the first 10 minutes or so, and then after that, the whole thing came apart, and he didn't really regain his footing till kind of towards the middle. Um, and by then, it was too late. The debate was over, basically. You know. Yeah, it wasn't very illuminating uh, in way of Trump because his performance was kind of just the same shtick he always does. Um, I do think that the Democrats ended up shooting themselves in the foot though with these rules in which they're turning off the mics when the other person's talking because like I think that Trump trying to interrupt and interject when Biden's talking actually would have saved him a lot of those times.
That's
Well,
true.
and it's like
You know,
it's like, I mean, Trump wants to put out this I'm this virile tough guy, and you miss the opportunity of like, well, let him beat up an old man. That's not going to play well, you know.
yeah, it's what didn't play well in 2020 where people just found it annoying.
Yeah,
Like the only line that anyone remembers from any of those debates was when Joe
we
Biden said, "Will you shut up?"
Right.
so
Yeah,
great,
what the
like
whole country was
so
thinking.
great.
But
Yeah,
there was nothing of substance that anybody remembers. So
no,
yeah,
Yeah, the problem is, as I see it, and I've seen lots and lots of presidential debates. Now, they've had good ones, they've had bad ones, where racists have turned on the debates. But unlike prior debates, where Obama had a bad debate as an example, then came back and did real well on the next one. The problem with this debate, it wasn't so much about that Biden screwed up or whatever the case might be, or answered the question incorrectly, or that he wasn't quick on his feet. It's that he showed his age, and age is not something that you can fix. So, regardless of the next debate, the next venue, and so forth, in the American public, in their mind, they're going to be left with the image of a struggling elderly man. And we all love him. I mean, he's a good guy and so forth. But the universal opinion is that he's just no longer physically and mentally up to the task. He can have good days. As an example, the day after the debate, he had a great rally. Of course, he was working with a teleprompter. Alfred probably had a good night's sleep, so that probably helped. He did have a whirlwind of travel before the debate, to Europe a couple of times, to the West Coast for a fundraiser. That's going to take a
well, but
toll
the
on
entire
anyone.
week before the debate, he was holed up in Camp David.
Yeah, right.
So
So yeah, he
I
did
mean,
get
like
some rest.
he's
Yeah,
getting
that's
14
true.
hours of sleep a day. Like
That's true.
yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
we can blame his travel schedule for that.
right.
One thing we could say is that every president has had their first debate as the incumbent president has been bad.
Right.
You
Me
know,
Yeah.
too
like
with Reagan,
Barack
sure
Obama's first debate against Mitt
sure.
Romney, in which he came off like an asshole and he was above this whole thing and shouldn't even be there. Like that
Yeah.
didn't play well. George W. Bush's debate against John Kerry, the first one, was a disaster. I was listening to a podcast. They were talking about Ronald Reagan's first debate as an incumbent against Walter Mondale didn't go very well. Right.
Yeah.
Like it's because the president hasn't really been like actively doing this kind of thing, having to be on the political defensive with like an opponent in 4 years.
Yeah.
So, but the opponent very well might have just gotten out of like, a primary or something. So their skills are a little more honed. And the president
True.
usually needs to be reminded how to debate properly. But this one's like, I don't think there's recovering from this one. I don't even know if there's going to be a second debate based on that.
Well, and it begs the question of what is the merit of having these debates, especially, I mean, I
Sure.
could see if you have two different candidates, but with these two candidates, it's like everybody's made up their mind already.
Mm.
And simply on, I think you could say, even if it was just a Trump candidate,
Yeah.
either you love him or you hate him. And he's a known entity now. In fact, I think it's a disadvantage that he's got going against him in his race now is that he is a known quantity. You know,
Well,
his thing now is like I gotta he's got to keep trying to make the hooky buzzword get the base riled up sort of thing, but we all know who we're voting for,
yeah,
like
there's a
or
good
not.
argument to make that like debates have never really mattered. They never move the needle at all. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, that as well.
mostly like sort of like a network TV ratings grab, but
Yeah.
like there's nothing that actually like substantively they don't change the conversation at all.
Well, and I think we got to look at like what people vote on. I think very few people in the U.S.
Yeah,
are voting on foreign policy issues.
no, they
um,
never care about that.
they don't care. Like they want, people out there that I know around in North Idaho are voting for lower gas prices as if there's really
Right.
much of a connection.
Right.
Yeah,
I always love that thread. Well, but you're still
Yeah.
left with the fact that Biden came off looking, I hate to use the word incompetent, but he came off as looking very, very old. And you can't unring that bell. That's the image that people have. 52 million people tuned into the debate. So it is going to have some impact. And you did have a tight race right up until the
Mhm.
debate, particularly in the swing states. So now they're left with the do we stay with the current guy? And the problem is it has created so much uncertainty and anxiety amongst Dems, as an example. Half of them have hit the panic button, and the other half are
Yeah.
rallying behind their guy. Well, the problem is in a perfect world, he would have, it'd be an uphill battle for him to win the race. And now, you've got all the publications, the New York Times, all the major newspapers, Tom Friedman, who's a
Hmm.
pretty well respected columnist, who have written, articles to say, Joe, it's time to step aside. Do the patriotic thing. Don't do it.
What?
Don't be an
Yeah,
RBG, right?
Yeah.
And
I've
it's
been saying
interesting.
that there's a decision, right, that they have to make, and there are two options. One is that they can drop out now, right, suspend the campaign, Joe Biden, and release all of his delegates, in which case he will be remembered fondly by the Democratic Party, and his remaining years will be filled with invitations to be a speaker at so and so event and hobnob with whoever, right? And if they continue to run and don't select that option, they will lose in November, and then they will be pariahs in the Democratic Party for the rest of their lives.
True. That's
They
right.
will be isolated. They will be vilified. They will be, greedy. They will be like, she will, Jill Biden will have this sort of like Lady Macbeth reputation, and Joe as just this like, what was, who was the president during, from 1912 to 1920?
Oh gosh,
Woodrow
Roosevelt,
Wilson.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wilson,
Woodrow
Wilson.
Wilson. There was a period towards the end of Woodrow Wilson's presidency when, like, he was so infirm from a stroke and everything that Edith Wilson was basically running the country. Like there's going to be like jokes like that for the next like however long. Yeah,
Right.
But
it's like it'd be pretty ugly if they stayed in and then lost. You
Right.
know,
Right.
yeah, out of sheer like avarice and pride. Like
Right. Right.
well, and yeah, it's definitely a bad play, bad strategy. I mean, even the Democrats, just as a convention, should just be like, look, man, we got to have a talk. There's a larger looming existential issue here as well that people are voting around, and you're not cutting the mustard when it comes to that. I mean, we
Right.
look at today's Supreme Court ruling that Trump is broadly immune to any. I really want to ask, anybody where in any statute anywhere is a president given any sort of immunity whatsoever.
Yeah,
But now it's Supreme Court precedent. I mean, there's a larger existential issue going on with our democracy. I think a lot of people are voting around, but we're going to split the ticket a million ways to Sunday if Biden stays in.
Right.
You know,
Right.
there is one additional wrinkle too, and this is let's see here. This is um, FEC rules that have to do with
oh yeah,
the campaign finances that Joe Biden has already raised.
yeah,
Well, those are basically frozen and attached to him, and the only other person who would have access to them is Kamala Harris. So if
yeah,
like the nominee were to not be Joe Biden, then those funds would theoretically, I think, just go back to the donors or something, or they would just like end up in limbo. Like a
Hmm.
different candidate that is not Joe Biden or Kamala Harris wouldn't have access to them, and so much of the presidential race is just fundraising that like
yeah.
you'd be basically starting from zero.
Which is, yeah,
Like,
that'd be a tough
no,
hill to
no ad
climb.
buys, no nothing for
Right.
like the
No, get
first
out the
two
vote.
months.
No
Yeah, but
field
Yeah,
campaigns.
there's a coming from a marketing background on this, you've got enough. There's enough eyes on it already that if you were to just come out swinging, I don't think you're gonna need to run a lot of ad buys. If they're like, if I was Gavin Newsom, there's an opportunity here that you don't even have to be out, running commercials. Everybody knows who Trump is. Anybody who's like, well, Biden's too old, you take the argument away from, out of the equation, and whoever you run is just like, okay, I'm voting for him because I'm not voting for Trump.
Right.
yeah.
You
There's
know,
like there's that known quantity thing that a new candidate would have to go up against, like because Donald Trump would be basically a de facto incumbent.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Like if
and
Joe
that's
Biden
and that
come over to leave, then like you would have to get over that incumbent advantage, and you'd have to make people super familiar with your new candidate.
yeah, and
Right.
that's part of the problem though that Trump, I think, faces, is that he's not an incumbent, or he's obviously, I don't think he performs well as an incumbent candidate,
Mhm.
um, because he doesn't actually have any substance. There isn't anything to get to know. All you know is the bluster and this, rhetoric. That's what gets people all, oh, ha ha ha, let's drain the swamp, let's build the wall, let's tear it all down and never have any. There's no plan on what we're going to do afterwards, but we're frustrated with the system. We're gonna,
Yeah,
we're gonna. That's what he's selling,
yeah.
and that, no, that being a known quantity now, I think that's why, I think that's why what a lot of people have been betting on is that they're like, well, you're going to run against the incumbent that you just lost to, you know.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think that if Joe Biden's age thing wasn't part of this conversation, which, like, to me, honestly, like, if you're going to vote in Donald Trump, who's 3 years younger, we're going to be in the same place as a country 3 years
Mhm.
from now.
That's right.
Um,
They were in high
you
school
know,
together. They were in high school
Well,
at the
age
same
yeah,
affects
time.
everyone
So,
differently, though.
yeah.
sure, and
Yeah.
there's a fair argument to say that, Donald Trump has dementia too.
Yeah, I
There's
mean,
plenty of evidence out there that people could point to, just like they do with Joe Biden. It's just one side, like, really latched onto this as a talking point and hammered it home to people, and conveniently ignored the, Donald Trump is no spring chicken either.
Right.
Like,
yeah, we've moved past the point where like any of the statements need to be like ideologically coherent anymore, or there needs to be like a good like pattern of thought. Like now, like whoever gets the most points is just the person who can finish all their sentences.
Well, that's what I'm
Right.
saying is that if you get somebody out here, and I'm not, and I know Re- Democrats have a problem with running technocrats, and Republicans hate them. Populists hate them. Uh, but
Yeah,
if you got somebody out there who was coherent, well spoken, I don't think that it would be too hard of a lift to get a platform across. You wouldn't need as much ad spend now. They already are holding the country in rapture, just because they're the new nominee and they're not Joe Biden,
yeah,
Well, I
you
think
know.
you'd have such a showcase if you were to bring up. I mean, if they get to that point where the Dems say, you know what, chances with Biden at the head of the ticket, we're maybe in a 10%. So they're at that stage where they need to make a decision, and if they make the decision to switch, then I think automatically we recognize it's most likely going to be something a younger generation, right? It's going to be a Gen
Hmm.
X, or it's going to be, as an example, a Whitmer, a Shapiro, a Gavin Newsom, and so forth. And so then you're going to have much more of a, uh, you know, A B choice, if you will, for everybody looking at the election to say, well, I got this one old guy who's not in very good
Yeah.
shape and is a bit of a nut job, a big
Yeah,
nut
the
job.
conversation then, yeah, it
Yeah,
switches.
it
It's like
flipped.
now this
It's
is
a
Trump's problem. The age
well,
thing becomes
exactly.
Trump's problem now.
Well,
Yeah.
exactly right. Now we've done a 180 on the entire discussion. By the way, if you take Whitmer, you deliver Michigan. That's the swing state. You take
Hmm.
Shapiro, you get Pennsylvania. That's the swing state. And both Shapiro and Whitmer carry, a certain amount of credibility up there in the Rust Belt. So Michigan,
Hmm.
Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin are pretty closely
yeah.
linked. And I think, that part of the country would get behind a Midwest candidate or an Amy Klobuchar, so forth. So I think they have a deep bench. I think, and you look at something like a Gavin Newsom, he's telegenic, he's a great debater. I think if you were to see him on the debate stage, he'd wipe the floor, with that kind of an
Newsom's
opportunity.
the thing is that he's had too high of a profile too. Like,
He is, and
yeah,
he is roundly. It's funny up here in Coeur
Oh yeah.
d'Alene.
Oh yeah. He's the
I
antichrist
mean,
up there.
he
Yeah.
is, and I'm like, and they're like, well, all these Californians that are leaving and coming up here. I'm like, everybody says that everywhere. They said that to
yeah.
me in
Right.
Portland. They said
Yeah.
that to me. I'd hear that in California, you know.
Uh-huh.
But they hate Gavin Newsom just because he's from California.
That's right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
what's interesting that I'm seeing is kind of an odd litmus test for what's um, the connection I made is the French snap elections they're holding right now.
Yeah.
Um, and it's interesting to see that they've had huge voter turnout, um, especially amongst young people, but they weren't able to overcome Le Pen's party.
Right.
I think in the first round she was up 34% or something, and they're losing because the left over there is split into three parties,
Right.
and they're not going to be able to get any sort of. And I think that that's kind of a precursor of what's happening here is we're going to end up splitting our own tickets, and I think that's what they're afraid of. If they drop Biden, they're like, well, we're going to split the ticket to a bunch of different people.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
And
but
interesting. I
only one
wonder.
person will get the nomination.
for
Yeah.
You
sure.
know.
But I mean, we, you and I personally have friends up here, Mike, that either if they don't believe in voting, if they are voting, they're voting for Kermit the Frog.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Well, there's like
you know,
I mean, the thing
I
is,
know
like,
who
we've
that
never
is.
like
yeah,
our
yeah.
friends have never factored into like any sort of political calculation because they're unreliable voters. They're like
Well, yeah, they really are.
nobody like ever panders to them in any way or whatever,
No,
which is good.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's uh, I found myself missing what's his name the other day. What's the comedian that we ran out of the party 5 years ago? Al, uh, Minnesota senator.
Oh,
Oh, Al
yeah.
Franken. Al Franken.
Yeah,
Al Franken. Yeah, Al
yeah,
Frankenstein. How can I forget Al
Yeah.
Frankenstein?
yeah,
Yeah.
What Donald Trump used to call him. Yeah,
yeah,
that was like a playground level, like
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, okay, man.
Yeah.
thing.
He got
Um,
me too'd.
but he would
Yeah.
have been a shoo in. Like, oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh
man, he
yeah.
would have soared.
Oh,
Yeah,
are you kidding
he would
me?
have taken Minnesota off the chessboard altogether.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, yeah, that would have been a slam dunk. But now we ruined that.
So yeah,
Well,
I 100% agree. Thank you very much. It was that East Coast senator that put the nail in his coffin. Uh,
Catherine Gillibrand.
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
very
it was
much.
Hillary
Yeah,
Clinton's replacement in New York.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Thank you very much. That was a great effort. So the question
Yeah.
then becomes: it's a twofold question, two-part question. I'll pose to both of you. Number one, first question is: will Biden step aside? And the second question is: do you think he should step aside? So let's go with the second question first. Nick, I'll go to you first. Do you think Biden should step
Yeah.
aside?
I mean, it's late in the game. That is a challenge. I think that there is a path forward for another candidate to run.
Right.
It's not going to be easy. They're going to have to capitalize on a lot of early moves and make a lot of really quick big wins. But yeah, and honestly, like, this is, yes, in answer to the question, he should step aside because there is a larger existential threat going on to democracy that's
Mm-hmm.
not, it doesn't have anything to do with Republicans or Democrats. It's whether or not we're going to have a second republic in a few years and follow the French's suit, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I think he should. It's going to be an uphill fight, but yeah, you
What do
know.
you think, Mike? Should he step aside?
Um, yeah, obviously. I mean, if he does that, then our chances of winning 2024 go from like 20% to, like, with a replacement 40% or something.
I
I'd
think the
still,
math is about
yeah,
correct.
I'd still be in Donald Trump's favor because the old switcheroo people aren't going to appreciate. It's going to look unstable. The person will be a sort of unknown quantity, whoever we replace him with. You know,
Right. Right. Yeah,
yeah.
I 100% agree. So the second part of the question is what are the odds of him stepping aside?
I think probably pretty low.
Yeah.
Um, I think it would. I think I mean, I think pretty low, all things being equal. I could
Hmm.
see, some sort of health issue coming up or something, or just enough, just getting beaten down enough and being like, all right, dude,
Right.
yeah, like Mike said, screw you guys. I'm gonna go have a nice
Right.
life doing speaking tours
Right.
from now
Right.
on. You know, uh, I think it's pretty low though that like he's gonna want to step out of it because
Yeah.
we're deep into it. He should have said if this was gonna be a real move for the Democrats, they should have been talking about this 8 months ago, a year ago.
I think part of them probably have. I agree with your assessment. So, Mike, what do you think the odds are that Biden steps aside?
I don't know. It's really hard to. I mean, like it looked like it was going to happen for about a minute.
Right.
I'm going to say probably now like 1 in 5, 1 in 3, maybe.
That's about what
Yeah,
I
I think
got.
most likely he's going to stay. He's surrounded by people who are encouraging him to stay
Yeah,
Right.
and have a series of vested interests in his continuing to run. Although I don't know what they're deluding themselves into thinking now.
Right.
Like they're not going to win. He can still run.
yeah, we're
Right.
we're all not reading the same tea leaves here.
Right. Right.
One way or another, he's not going to be president in
No,
2025.
no,
Like
Yeah.
if that
Right.
happens is up to them, but
yeah.
Right. Right.
that's over. That ended.
And by the way, the big donors have all run for the exits. That money is
Yep.
this money
Well,
is sitting on park right now. Hmm.
they're deflecting their money. They're now sending it to down ballot candidates.
Right.
Yep,
Yeah.
they're making a strategic decision that if they're not going to win at the top of the ticket, at least they can control a lot of the legislature. Then,
Yeah.
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, like I think the same is getting spent roughly, but like it's now you're getting an influx in state races and House races and Senate races.
Well, it's interesting to see that a lot of the Trump candidates that were in primaries aren't actually winning. So there is kind of two fights going on here. You could have a Trump candidate or presidency where he gets lame ducked out, even from there's plenty of Republicans that were running against, in primaries that were like, yeah, I'm not a Trump. I'm just straight up not a Trump,
Right.
Yeah.
fan. Like, so I don't
Yeah.
know.
I thought we were supposed to, weren't we supposed to get the vice presidential nominee
I thought
during
we
the
were
debate
Yeah, I
too?
know.
finally.
There was that whole like thing, and no, he didn't.
Yeah, now he's playing like footsie with Glenn Youngkin, and like
Yeah,
he didn't get it because I don't think he knows. I
no,
mean,
I
he's
know.
like,
He's
I've got my guy in my mind. Like
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna let you know next week.
He'll be there at the debate. Tune in for the
Yeah.
next Scooby Doo mystery.
Yeah.
Well, he needs to
Uh-huh.
decide soon now. I mean, like it is getting a little late. Like he
Yeah.
needs to start appearing places with this guy.
Well, he doesn't. Trump doesn't care because Trump doesn't want to share the spotlight. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and
I don't think that Virginia's takeable, but like Glenn Youngkin would be an interesting move.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I mean,
that'd be an
I
nice,
don't.
aggressive move.
nice button down neocon.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I think that Trump's handlers they've got this all worked out, and he's just sitting on it like I don't want to announce it
Hmm.
because he's a showboat. Trump didn't decide who his VP was. Trump can barely decide if he's going to cater, the next White House event with McDonald's or Burger King. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Did anyone? Is there any specific moments about the debate that we want to talk about? I don't think we really got into the specifics of it.
Well, there's a couple of things on the specifics. Number one is at the beginning of the debate, where he completely lost his train of thought, and he
Yeah,
finished this train of thought by saying, "And we killed Medicare." That was
beat
like,
Medicaid or
yeah,
something.
yeah. So it was like,
yeah.
oh my god, that was yeah.
Yeah.
Because as I was watching him, by the way, and when you're watching him, it
Hmm.
was far worse than listening to him because you're watching to him
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm looking at somebody who practically I'm thinking they're like stroking out right at that moment.
yeah,
I mean, it was that bad. It was kind of a Mitch McConnell, 30-second
yeah,
freeze where you're thinking, OMG,
yeah.
So, and then at several times frequently throughout the debate, when Trump would just, lie, just throw a just big, big,
He wants to
huge
raise your
whale of a lie
taxes by
out there.
4 times.
Yeah.
It
He
was
he's
he
I
wants
think
to
I
raise
heard
your
this
taxes by four
hundreds of thousands.
times.
yeah,
You
and
said hundreds of thousands of people are being murdered by illegal immigrants every
yeah,
year.
right. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And
that
Hundreds of
was fun.
thousands.
That was funny. That was one of our buddies up here I was talking to the other day that he's like there's
Mm.
hundreds of thousands there's 100,000 plus illegal immigrants crossing the border down in Texas every day. And I'm
Every
like
day.
every day is
be
that's
30 million
that's
a
that's
year.
quite a yeah that's in the hundreds of thousands you say.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands. Okay.
Like
Yeah.
okay,
Uh,
yeah, I
that's the problem. See, and that's what. So there was a number of things in debate. There would be these whoppers that were just hanging out there like these big fastballs, right across the center of the plate, and Biden couldn't respond to him. All I could do was, glazed over, you lie. And then also he had a
the
number of occasions to use time, and the
yeah.
moderators, Jake Trapper kept coming back and say, Mr. President, you got another minute and a half, and he's no, I'm good.
Well, they usually
Yeah,
know. They usually did that when they had a follow up question, and they
Yeah,
didn't know how much time they had to answer the follow up question.
yeah.
yeah.
The
There was, yeah,
But
there
the
was
even in
like
his summary,
some, huh?
even in
Well,
his
there was
summary
some
at the end
lost
of the debate,
opportunities on both sides though, because at one
yeah,
point Joe Biden, completely unprompted, said, "We've never had any American soldiers killed during my presidency." Right?
yeah, oops, yeah,
Which is, I mean, like, yeah, he had all
yeah,
the what 13, 14 soldiers, that were
yeah,
bombed at Abbey Gate, in
yeah,
Afghanistan.
yeah,
I
right,
guess a few more died earlier this year. I mean, like it was apparently he received the coffins, like he should have remembered that.
right,
But
right,
and Trump could have jumped all over him for that and scored like an easy win. And I think Trump totally forgot to. He
yeah.
couldn't
yeah,
communicate anything either.
Well, I mean, Trump's line for the longest time, or not, maybe not Trump, but his supporters' lines for the longest time has been, Trump is the first president in the history of America to never start a war during his presidency. And I'm
Yeah,
like, well, that's one untrue, and
yeah,
two, like, Trump. Trump loves to take credit for all sorts of things that he had really nothing to do with. The big one strategically for me was the big missed opportunity was January 6th. I would have gotten up there and I would have just made every single issue about January 6th. I would have
Right.
hammered home the existential threat that you
Right.
are just an existential threat. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you want to talk to me about soldiers dying? Well, we were in a position where we were going to have to send soldiers to the Capitol
Yeah.
and put
Right.
them in harm's way.
Right.
Like, oh, you want to
Right.
talk about taxes? Well, how much money have we wasted on trying to prosecute,
Right.
January 6th traitors,
Right. Right.
Like I mean, every issue would have been that, and that's what I would have
Well,
done is just, but I mean,
absolutely. And would have thrown it out. And so I understand you're looking to pardon these people, and that he
oh yeah, you're looking
postulated
to
and
pardon
said
these
that
guys,
the police were there letting them in, and that Nancy
which
Pelosi
is
was
a
really in
lie that's
charge
been,
of security, and
which
Yeah.
isn't
Yeah.
true.
yeah, exactly. That's
which
my
isn't,
point.
which that's not how that works.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Trump tried to spin that. That didn't really work. You
Yeah.
know.
no, well, it just because it
Well,
just
the thing
doesn't.
is too, like, okay, what did they brought up January 6th, and then he immediately said, what was going on January 6th? We had low inflation. You know what was going on
Right.
January 6th? Stock
Yeah, we
market.
had a story. We had a
That
border.
was like,
Yeah.
but what was interesting about that is that was clearly a rehearsed line that he was
Yeah,
going
Right.
to say because
yeah,
they knew he would bring up January 6th. So that's actually his strategists and handlers that came up
yeah.
with that line. He didn't come up with that on the spot.
Right.
No,
Right.
no,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he
no.
was just regurgitating a line at that point.
Yeah.
And that
It'd
was
been more
that was
interesting if we got a
pathetic.
candid response from him. Huh?
Yeah,
Well, I
that was
mean, it's
pathetic.
just you got him cornered dead to rights.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you know, and you also have like again the Supreme Court issue today of the day. Does he have immunity and whatnot from these things? And the court ruled that broadly he does, but which is dumb and absolutely horrible. But they kicked it down to a lower court to decide the January 6th issue. So I
Well,
mean,
it's
even
all
the
part of the
court,
delay game. It's all part of the delay game.
it
But they've,
is,
yeah,
it
they've
is.
successfully delayed it. Justice delayed is justice denied, because they've delayed it. The
Mhm.
trial is not going to happen prior to the election. Trump gets
Well,
elected, trial goes away.
I think Biden as an official act could just drone strike Trump now, I guess. Like that's just
Yeah,
an official act. He can't be
that's true.
convicted. Like
That's
I
true.
Yeah.
mean, I've heard the argument that they're like, well, what if they want to impeach you? And he's like, well, what if I just wipe out the Senate? like, I mean, now
Yeah,
this is becoming Star Wars. Like, I am the Senate.
yeah,
Yeah.
like,
yeah.
I mean,
I am the
what a
state.
wild, yeah, I am the state. What sort of wildness is this? But
Hmm.
here we are.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's going to be interesting. So we have an interesting week coming up. We'll get together next week, but I think this week is going to. I would put it, if something's going to happen, it's going to happen this week. And if there's no
Yeah.
decision by next week, then that is a decision. No decision is a decision, because if they're going to do
Mhm.
anything, they're going to have to do it. Certainly in the next week or two.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we're
Right.
talking every second counts now. If they're,
Yeah. Right.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we shall see. We live in interesting times.
uh, yep.
All right. So I just
okay.